writing is not something you can just sit down and start doing. Sure, you can sit down and start writing, but it's not always going to be exactly what you want it to turn out to be. That's why you have to have a plan. So today we're going to be talking about the writing stages, how to figure out a plan, and then writing the profile. So the first thing you need to do is figure out, what am I going to write about? This is very important. This is going to be the guide to your writing. This is going to be something that you're going to think about as you are compiling all the information that you want to. As you're beginning your research, you need to know what you're going to write about. So make sure that as you're doing that, that you have a good question in mind of what you're going to write about. It needs to be clear and focused, and also be concise. You don't want to write about this huge, huge thing. Write about a very specific thing. So as you're working, you need to do some planning and research. And much like this sign that I'm sure you've seen before, they have obviously not planned ahead. And this always gets a little chuckle out of me. Sure, it's a dad joke, but I'm a dad, so that works. So as you're doing your planning and your research, you got to outline the ideas that you want. You might have a whole wide gamut of ideas you want to work on. So just outline the ideas. See which ones work the most. Some of the ways you can do that is you can do a word cloud. You can write down the topic that you want to write about, and then all around that you write connecting words and see where those take you. And maybe you've done a little research already, so maybe you need to whittle the research you've done. You've got a big stack of papers and things, and you need to exactly find out what you want to write about. So whittle it down. Take out the things that might be extra, the research topics that you have one or two extra sources on. And then as you're doing that, find your final sources. You got to find a stack of things that you really trust. After you do that, evaluate your sources. Look through and see if the source is going to be something that is worthwhile for you to talk about, or worthwhile to your paper all and overall. Because sometimes just because you find a source, it's not going to necessarily work for your topic. So once you've done all of that, you've done all of your outlining and your whittling and your researching, you need to separate everything down into topics. So as you are outlining your paper, you have different topics to go through. You don't want to just write and write and write until the end. You got to have your paper separated into topics. So, the stages of writing. Basically, the stages of writing are, there's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. But if it were just that easy, you wouldn't have to do much planning at all. So there's some things you need to do as you're working. You got to first think about what you want to write about. So the first stage is thinking. Just sit down, take some time just to mentally prepare yourself to write about this. Then you got to do some collecting. So that means you're going to different places, the internet, the library, your friend's house, and collecting information. Then you are researching. So after you've done all this collecting, research that build upon what you've already known and what you've already learned. Then you do some narrowing. So whittle down those things, as I said earlier. Then you do your thesis building. This is the question. This is what your paper will be built upon. If you don't have a good thesis, then you're not going to have a good paper. Your thesis will really help to drive the whole paper, and it should be multi-layered thesis instead of just a single statement. Today I will be talking about Africa. Expand that a little bit too. Today I'll be talking about Africa and the Ivory Coast and something else to give you some ideas to build your thesis. Then once you've done that, you need to do a drafting. So sit down and just write out some stuff. Maybe you need to write out your introduction. Just get it done and write a draft. Then after you've done your introduction, then do the body of your paper, and then do your conclusion. Just draft out the whole thing. And if you can, if it is possible, see if you can write it all in one sitting. That might not be possible, but if you have the possibility of doing that, then just sit down and draft the whole thing. Now, if you've done that, take a breaking. I couldn't find an ing word for this, so I'm just going to add take a breaking. And that means after you've done all the writing, you've done your draft, just save the file or put the notebook aside, and then just take a walk. Take a step away from it. The time that you take your step away from it, your mind is still going to be working on it. And in the back of your mind, the subconscious will be thinking about the process that you're doing. And when you go to do your next draft or go to do your revising, then you will be able to see your stuff from a different perspective. So there are important steps. And much like in golf, I don't do much golfing, so if those of you that might golf, I might be missing a step. But you don't just go out there, put the ball on the tee and swing, and you make a hole in one. There's a bunch of different things. You've got to look at the wind. You've got to look at the terrain. You have to look at the special golf club, the specific golf club. Sometimes even the ball or the height of the tee. You got to make sure that you are following all the important steps, and then you hit the ball. And then rarely you hit a hole in one, but sometimes you might. So you got to then go down the fairway and get it onto the green, and then finally get into the hole. So there are definite important steps to golfing. There's also important steps to writing a paper. So what you do is after you've done the writing itself, I suggest that you read your paper. So now that you've taken your breaking and you're sitting down to work on your next step, read through it. Then look for editing mistakes. So things like that have been spelled wrong, some grammar issues. Maybe you're using incorrect syntax, or in certain places you used non-academic writing. It's possible that you have not paid attention to the topic. Maybe you got off topic. So you do the editing and remove all of those grammar mistakes or spelling mistakes. And then you want to do a revising. So what the revising is taking all the changes that you've made or the things that you want to do, and then put those into your paper. Now, when you have done changing all of the wording and the syntax, you might find as you are looking through the paragraphs that you're changing that there's some revising needs to be done. You've got to move this paragraph up to, and this other paragraph, you need to delete it completely. So as you're working, you want to revise your work. Make sure that you have exactly what you want to say in exactly the right way that you want to say it. And then, after you've done all this revising, then you do the rewriting process. So you read through the whole thing, and then you rewrite it. You remove all of your notes. You make sure everything's in the same process, and then you know what you do again? You read it again. And after you do the reading, you do another editing pass. And then you do another revising pass. And then you do another rewriting pass. And you know what you do after that? If necessary, you start the process again. So there are important steps, and I definitely suggest as you're working on your papers, don't just write it one time. Make sure that you write it enough times and rewrite it enough times so it is a clean, nicely written paper. So, the profile. This is the paper that you're going to be working on for the next few weeks. And the profile is something that is maybe not like something you've written before. So a profile is just imagine something that you've seen on television or read about in a magazine or a newspaper article. It's about an interesting subject. It's something that you are interested in, something that you care about, because if you don't care about it, then the writing is going to it's going to feel like that. Your readers are going to know that you really don't care about it. Make sure that you have the necessary background when you're working on the profile. The profile is going to be a full picture of something, so you need to make sure you have the necessary background. You don't want to just come at a profile of let's say a scientist, and as you're working with the scientist, you forget to ask him, why did he become a scientist? There's necessary background to bring you to where you are today. Try to find an interesting angle as well. You don't want to just talk to this scientist and say, you know what, let's go into your laboratory and I will talk to you about lab equipment. See if there's something different, something interesting about the scientist that you think that somebody should care about. Then, when possible, take a look at the first-hand account. It is best with a profile for something for you to be connected to. So this is something that a journalist would do. They would go into the field and they would follow somebody around and just take notes about their daily life, see who they are, what they do, and how important things are to them. And they get this first-hand account. It feels most real, and it gets the writing from something called verisimilitude, which means that there's some reality to it, there's some life to it. So you get the first-hand account. And then find the engaging details. If you're writing about that scientist that we talked about, find some engaging details. Don't talk about the things that every scientist is about or every scientist has commonalities with. Write about something that is specific, some engaging detail about this specific scientist. Maybe this scientist is studying Alzheimer's because his mother is stricken with Alzheimer's. Or maybe you want to talk about the specifics that this scientist went through as he was discovering a new angle in the Alzheimer's research. And then find out the engaging details, the specific things. So let's talk about a few examples of what a profile would do. So a sports figure. I am a football fan. And I guess I'll tell you, I'm a Green Bay Packers fan. I really like the Packers. So I would choose to profile one of their players. I probably wouldn't choose to profile the quarterback because he's been in the news a lot. There's been a lot of articles written about him. But maybe what I would do is choose somebody that nobody really talks about. Maybe the holder for the place kicking, or maybe one of the interior linemen, or maybe one of the guys that is a second string person. So I would look at them and I would talk about what they did to get to where they are. I would talk to them about the interesting details about their workout. How do they prepare, even though they're not going to play every day or every game? How do they prepare in case they're needed? The guy in front of them gets injured or something. So that's a way to look at that sports figure. Think about it as like a magazine article that you would write about this person. Or maybe a famous writer. One of my favorite writers is Stephen King. So I would not talk about the horror that he writes. I would talk about different things. Maybe talk to him about how his life was growing up. Talk to him about how he became a writer. Talk to him about the ways that he learned to engage the written word. Because most likely he didn't just sit down one day and say, you know what, I want to be a famous writer. He sat down and said, I want to learn how to tell a good story. So take a look at the engaging details about his life that made him where he is today. Or maybe there's a favorite vacation spot that you like to go to. My wife and I and the family, we used to go to one of the beaches around here all the time. And it was our favorite, not just because it was the beach, which I honestly don't really care for the beach, but it was the things that we got to do around the beach. It was the things that were involved in the area. It was the things that my children enjoyed doing there. They loved digging in the sand. Sure, they might not have enjoyed playing in the water at that age, but they enjoyed digging the sand. They wanted to dig holes. They wanted to build the pyramids out of the sand. And so that's the things that we enjoyed about it. There were shops down there. There were different places to visit that we always went to. So if I were to write about my favorite vacation spot, I would talk about those things. And maybe I would write it from the point of view of one of my children instead of from my point of view, because I'm going to see things differently than one of my children would. Or maybe there's a cool innovation or invention that you would like to know more about, or something that you are involved in. Um, and think about the different things that you could write about or learn about with one of those things. There, there are so many different angles that you could take, so many different things you could do. So just dig down into it, find an interesting subject, find the necessary background, attack it from an interesting angle, get that first-hand account, follow around somebody, interview them, do something, and then find the engaging details. Much like the writing process, the profile writing process is very specific. So what you want to do is look at all of the things you can write about and choose your subject. That sounds kind of dumb, but it really does matter. You don't want to just sit down and throw darts at something. So sit down, choose your subject, and then consider your rhetorical situation. What is your purpose? Why do you care about this? Why do other people need to know about this? Then consider your audience. Is this going to be written for first graders? Is it going to be written for your instructor? Is it going to be written for your friends? Just consider the audience and pay attention to the things that have been done and said. Then you got to look at your stance. Are you going to profile somebody or something because you like it or you don't like it? Are you going to profile something that you agree with or disagree with? And then look at the design. How are you going to lay this out? How is it going to come across? Is there going to be any images that you're going to refer to, any specifics that you're going to talk about? So consider the design of the paper itself. So as you're doing this, as you're considering all these things, you got to generate your ideas. You got to get everything down. So you need to ask yourself some questions. What do you know? Where can you start? What is your basis? What's your baseline? How do you get to the end result? So what do you already know? Because if you already know it, you don't need to research it, obviously. This is something that you already know. Now, if this is a topic of something that you are personally experienced with, but the average layperson does not know about it, you're going to have to find some sources. Now, I mentioned earlier, I know about Stephen King. I've read a bunch of books about Stephen King, and there's things that I would write about him that I have learned from the books. And to me, because I have experienced a lot of his writing, it becomes common knowledge to me, but it's not common knowledge to everybody else. So I need to have the research beside me so I can cite my sources. You also, as you're working on this profile paper, you need to go in person. Maybe you need to interview somebody, or maybe if you're writing about your favorite vacation spot, you need to have experienced it. If it's somewhere that's far away that you couldn't go into right now, maybe you have pictures or videos or something. So experience it firsthand. If you need to interview somebody, you need to consider what you need to do as you're preparing to interview. You don't just walk up to somebody and start asking them questions. You don't walk up to a subject and just start the whole process. You got to prepare everything. So come with a list of questions. Don't just show up on the first day. Come with a thought out list of questions. Maybe after you've done all this, you need to do additional research. So you've done your interviewing, you've visited, you've done everything. So go and do the additional research. So anything that needs to be done next. So do this more and more research. You've already done a bunch, but maybe you got to do a little bit more so you can find the specific place that you want to write about your profile. And obviously you need to analyze your findings. So you might have found a whole bunch of stuff. If you're being smart, you've cast a wide net, but you need to analyze what your findings and what they say. You need to look at everything that you have done and pay attention to why it's important to your paper. Maybe it's not the most important thing, so you can just toss that out. Or maybe this one is the specific thing that you need to know. So analyze your findings and see exactly what you need to know about it. and then find your angle and support it. Just because you are writing about something doesn't mean that everybody is going to agree with what you're writing about or find it as interesting. So find your specific angle and then support it. Write from that side. As I said, I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, so I would find the angle of being a fan, and I would support it by talking about how this team, they are important to me, or how they are important to the community, or how they are important to something. And then I would support that based on the information that I have found. So if you are going to be doing an interview, or you're going to be going somewhere to work on a topic, there's some things you need to do. Basically, tips for observing. These are tips and tricks. First off, this is going to sound really dumb, but you got to pay attention. That means you go there. If you are interviewing somebody, you go and you listen to everything that they are saying. You pay attention, you ask questions, you ask follow-up questions. Don't just come with a list of questions and then say, this is all I need to know. Maybe they say something that you didn't expect. Maybe there's a piece of information that they shared and you might have missed it. So just say, wait a minute, can you repeat that? Can you tell me what else I need to know about this particular thing? This wasn't the direction I was planning on going, but maybe this is something new. This is a different direction. So pay attention. And the ways that you can pay attention are you can bring some specific tools. So if you own a cell phone or a smartphone, most likely you can download a recording device for free. Now, when you go to, if you're going to interview somebody, tell them, I am going to record this if that's okay. So turn it on. So then you have an audio recording of it, but also bring a pen and paper to write down specific ideas. Write down the things that are important about the things. Maybe you're talking about something and they've been talking for 10 minutes about a subject and you're kind of glazing over, you don't really care. But then at the 9-minute or the 11-minute, I guess, mark, they say something really interesting. So you need to write down, oh, this is really interesting. Pay attention to these words. And then when you play back your recording and listen to it later, then you have something to go on, some background. Also, if you're going to be going to your favorite spot, take your camera, take some pictures, maybe take some video. You can obviously do that with your cell phone or your smartphone, and just also bring some note paper for that too. Write about the weather, the temperature of your favorite vacation spot, or maybe the way the sand feels, or the sounds of the ocean that might not come across as you're recording on a video, and it definitely aren't going to come across if you're taking a picture. And then once you have all of your tools, you have everything together, then take it home and open your computer and then just review everything you have. Look at all the content, look at all of the pictures, listen to all the audio. It's going to take some time, certainly, but make sure that you are reviewing everything because you don't want to miss anything. And even if you've been to a place 1,000,000 times and you've taken 100,000 pictures there, and you're doing this for right now, then look through all those pictures. I'm not saying to look through 100,000 pictures of all of the past ever that you've ever been there, but review the stuff. Go through it. Don't just have it set aside and then, oh yeah, I needed to look at this picture as I'm working, and then bring the picture into your paper. So review everything so you're ready to write it, because if you just have all your sources laid out across the floor and all of the things laid about, and you're writing and you're looking just for something, it's going to take forever. So review your stuff, be ready to write, and you'll be able to write a very strong paper.